folks. It's Zach Elliott from Feel Free to Argue. I have something from one of the Project Censored books to read you. It's the most recent one. Here, let me show you the cover. And this one is called Seizing War Protesters' Assets. We'll talk a little bit about it afterwards. President Bush has signed 2 executive orders that would allow the U.S. Treasury Department to seize the property of any person perceived to, directly or indirectly, pose a threat to U.S. operations in the Middle East. The first of these executive orders, titled Blocking Property of Certain Persons Who Threaten Stabilization Efforts in Iraq, signed by Bush on July 17, 2007, authorizes the Secretary of Treasury, in consultation with the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense, to confiscate the assets of U.S. citizens and organizations who directly or indirectly pose a risk to U.S. operations in Iraq. Bush's order states, I have issued an executive order blocking property of persons determined, 1, to have committed or pose a significant risk of committing an act or acts of violence that have the purpose or effect of threatening the peace or stability of Iraq or government of Iraq, or undermining efforts to promote economic reconstruction and political reform in Iraq. Or 2, to have materially assisted, sponsored, or provided financial, material, logistical, or technical support for, or goods or services in support of, such an act or acts of violence, or any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order. Section 5 of this order announces that because of the ability to transfer funds or other assets instantaneously, prior notice to such persons of measures to be taken pursuant to this order would render these methods ineffectual. I therefore determine there need be no prior notice of listing or determination of seizure. On August 1st, Bush issued a similar executive order titled Blocking Property of Persons Undermining the Sovereignty of Lebanon or its Democratic Processes and Institutions. While the text in this order is for the most part identical to the first, the order regarding Lebanon is more severe. While both orders bypass the constitutional right to due process of law in giving the Secretary of Treasury authority to seize properties of those persons posing a risk of violence, or in any way, vague way, assisting opposition to U.S. agenda, the August 1st order targets any person determined to have taken or to pose a significant risk of taking actions, violent or nonviolent, that undermine operations in Lebanon. The Act further authorizes freezing the assets of a spouse or dependent child of any person whose property is frozen. The executive order on Lebanon also bans providing food, shelter, medicine, or any humanitarian aid to those whose assets have been seized, including the dependent children referred to above. Vaguely written and dangerously open to broad interpretation, this unconstitutional order allows for the arbitrary targeting of any American for dispossession of all belongings and demands ostracism from society. Bruce Fein, a constitutional lawyer and former Justice Department official in the Reagan administration, says of the order, "This is so sweeping, it's staggering. I have never seen anything so broad. It expands beyond terrorism, beyond seeking to use violence or the threat of violence to cower or intimidate a population." An editorial for the Washington Times, Fein states, "The person subject to an asset freeze is reduced to a leper. The Secretary's financial death sentences are imposed without notice or an opportunity to respond, the core of due process. They hit like a bolt of lightning. Any person's assets are frozen immediately confronts a comprehensive quarantine. He may not receive, and benefactors may not provide funds, goods, or services of any sort. A lawyer cannot provide legal services to challenge the Secretary's blocking order. A doctor cannot provide medical services in response to a cardiac arrest. Fine adds, the Justice Department is customarily entrusted with vetting executive orders for consistency with the Constitution. Is the Attorney General sleeping? And I think this is interesting. And I mean, on one level, I'm sure there are a lot of people who are saying, all right, this is a Bush thing, who cares? Well, like anything else that has the force of law, a signing statement will remain in effect until it is deliberately and purposefully removed. So, if this has not been actually rescinded, and as far as my research indicated, it has not been rescinded, then it is in effect, and whether or not, Obama has any intention of using it, he can. And honestly, I don't care how you feel about Obama. As the article points out, these are unconstitutional powers that the government has granted itself. And this is exactly the kind of thing that needs to be taken out as part of a house cleaning, but probably won't be, because nobody knows about it and nobody cares. So what you effectively have is you sort of have this latent tool for prosecutors just hanging around until some bright lad notices that it's still there and decides that he wants to use it for something. And maybe there'll be an uproar then when it's used for something. But until then, I think we need to be aware of this as the absolute criminalization of dissent. Because, honestly, based on just me going and protesting at the RNC and carrying a sign that said U.S. out of Iraq and Afghanistan, the law is so vaguely written, somebody could show up and take my house, freeze my bank account, deny medical care to me and my children. Because, it's spouses, it's dependent children. And, who knows? I was trying to affect and stop U.S. policy. I don't imagine I had much success, but, whether you have success or not doesn't matter. Your intentions don't even matter. If you do something and it has the effect, eventually, of doing this, or you contribute to an organization as something they do has the effect, eventually, of counteracting U.S. policy, according to this law, you are just as liable. You're just as responsible. You're just as on the hook to have everything in your life immediately taken away with no due process whatsoever. None. Zero. Zip. Just people show up, take all your shit, dump you in the street with the clothes on your back, if they let you keep those, and that's it. That's you. That's you for the rest of your life, with no recourse and can't even see a doctor or a lawyer. So there you go. If you think you have rights, think again. But, as always, this is Zach Elliott, and you can certainly feel free to argue.